Welcome to the Journey to an Eight-Figure E-Commerce Business podcast. We are back. I'm your host, Emmanuel, CEO and founder of Eleyae Systems, and I'm joined by my co-host this season, Grace Eleyae, who happens to be the CEO and founder of GraceEleyae.com, and also my sister. And we are both joined by the fantastic, the gregarious, the gracious, the generous, the gallant, and the peaceful, one and only genius, Bubba, CEO and founder of Giver. Welcome, Bubba.
Thank you very much. Excited to be here. I don't know about that introduction. You're a theatrical one, Emmanuel, but I'll take it. And really excited to chat with you both and, share how the sausage is made here and hopefully provide some inspiration, motivation, some background, things to chew on for listeners.
I'm sure it's going to be great. I'd love it if you'd start out. Just how would you describe your business and what you do and how you serve customers?
You betcha. So, CEO and founder of Giver. It's spelled GIVE''R. It's origin is a Canadian term. It means like give it your all, go for it, get after it. A lot of positive energy associated. And man, it's been a really interesting journey. Didn't start off with the intention of creating a clothing or an outdoor apparel business, but following my heart and passion, I love doing backcountry trips, anywhere from 3 to 8 days, and an area that I grew quite fond of when I was younger in northern Ontario. I started taking an annual trip there, and was friends and family, anywhere from 3 to 10 people, out in the middle of nowhere, catching fish to eat for dinner, like the good stuff. And as far as the origin of the brand, on the 5th annual trip, it was myself and 4 friends from here in Jackson, Wyoming. So we have this gorgeous mountain range, the Tetons, that are very distinct silhouette, and they're unlike any other mountains I've seen in the world. But I made hats for the crew that year that had the Tetons and the term Giver they were going to be exposed to up in Ontario. And I gave everyone the hats, and we had an awesome trip. And afterwards, I kept wearing the hat, and people would stop me on the street and say, "Hey, what's that hat all about? What's Giver mean?" And I'd explain it to them. And more often than not, they're like, "Well, can I buy one?" I had friends and family like, "Hey, that's a dope hat. I love the energy behind it. I'm going to give you $20 when you make more. Send me one." And the same happened with my other friends. And so it just became this, it truly like grew in an organic fashion of people interested and curious about the hat. So started off with like, okay, shit, there's something here. So we created a website. 2 hats and 2 t-shirts was our launch back in March of 2012. And the goal was, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more, but okay, what's the minimum viable product to get out there to test this? And rather than taking 3 years to create all, a massive collection of products and inventory, or we're just like, what does it take to get 2 t-shirts and 2 hats? And that's where we started. And there's a lot of bumps along the way.
Nice.
I love it.
And you've built a very robust company. And I have a very interesting question for you. At least I think it's interesting, because you've had $1 million Kickstarter launches, because you guys grew a lot with Kickstarter. You've also done some retail. You've built a 7-figure e-commerce business, has done 7-figure months. And I wonder, do you feel like a success?
It's a great question. It's heavy. I feel we have had, and I have experienced moments of success, but it's less of the destination and more of like the journey towards succeeding in our goals. So like the imposter syndrome is very much true. Like every step of the way, like, what am I doing? I don't know. Like, I don't have a background in clothing or apparel or leather design. So like, who am I to pretend like I know what we're doing? But I think that's a big piece in the whether or not we've achieved success is what timelines are our goals. And I mean, the very beginning, the goal wasn't, hey, let's sell $1 million in the first year of 2 t-shirts and 2 hats. It's like, we were very realistic. Is like, if we sell enough hats and t-shirts to make a few more,
Mhm.
well, hell, that'd be awesome. And if no one buys a thing, we will have learned a ton. So I think
Mhm.
establishing what the definition of success is and continuing to check back in with myself and the team,
Mhm.
we have been wildly successful in that we've learned, we've grown, we've had a positive impact, I believe, on the world and
Mhm.
our community. And we're just trying to get better at that.
Yeah,
So,
it's
long answer, long
no,
answer.
it's good because and I get why. I think as entrepreneurs we have a hard time saying yes to that question. Yeah, I'm a
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
success because, and that's why I asked it that way. Not are you successful? Are you becoming successful? Are you, because it is finite. Are you a success? It's hard to
Mhm.
say yes. We succeeded,
Mm-hmm.
even though by all intents and purposes, there's millions of people out there that would be listening to this and saying, "Yeah, he's a success. He crushed it." I've heard of Giver; they're
Mhm.
huge. Those guys are successful. But here you are,
Mhm.
saying, "Well," doubting yourself. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
kudos to you, man, on what you've done. I want to. If you don't want to say it, I'll say it. You are a success, my friend.
Well,
Success, you and your team and everyone else
Definitely.
is part of it.
and that, I think that's a huge piece of it, is like, am I and have I been in the person or the crazy one to keep things going and to be, uh it's not crazy necessarily, but like passionate enough to power through the hurdles and the roadblocks that
Mm.
always come up. There's always reasons that it shouldn't work or that it can't
Mhm.
work. So I have been the crazy one to keep pushing, but so much credit goes out to the team. And you know, it could be cliche to say the community, but I firmly believe
Mhm.
that. I mean, our crowdfunding story in itself, like, we couldn't have done any of these things without a community that was diehard and they actually cared and they're willing to take a chance on, a business who's growing and trying to figure things out. So,
Yeah.
um, so the whole ecosystem, I would say, is a success, or it has the ingredients to continue towards the path of succeeding on our goals.
Yeah. I want to hear more about how you started. So
Mm-hmm.
you've actually hit you're past the 10-year mark. You're at 11 plus
Mm-hmm.
years. So back in 2012, even hearing you say, we set up a website. I remember with us, like we've had to migrate from WooCommerce to Shopify. And back then, I don't even know if Shopify was around or as prolific as it is now. So
Mm-hmm.
let's start at the beginning. What actually led you? We heard your story, but how did you start essentially and
No,
manufacture those minimum viable products and all that?
that's a great point. So we started, that was just in the beginning days of Shopify. And
Mhm.
part of what was really neat at the time, I was involved in an entrepreneurship kind of crash course, like a 10-week startup course,
Mm.
where there were others who were trying to start businesses locally here in Jackson, or online business as well. It was like a great mix. And one of the other students was like, yeah, this this new company Shopify is really coming onto
Mhm.
the scene as far as, opening the doors for e-commerce. um, and so we kind of stumbled upon it again through
Mhm.
great recommendation, and that has been, our platform since the very beginning. And obviously
Mhm.
a lot has a lot has changed in the last 10 years. I
Mhm.
mean, the degree or the amount of energy that went into establishing a merchant bank account, because they didn't
Mhm.
have, you couldn't process everything through Shopify. That was
Mhm.
one of the more painful things. And it's kind of like a dinosaur structure that doesn't really exist anymore. But the learning, oh my gosh, like, the banking system is
Mhm.
taking it's an insane cut, and we weren't making
Mhm.
enough to really
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
really have those numbers work out. But
Mhm.
that's how we started. And
Mhm.
we were shipping, again, we had 2 t-shirts and 2 hats. So,
Yep.
um, I mean, this, to me, this is a great example. One of my good friends, Brian, ordered on the first day that we went live, and he bought a t-shirt, but our shipping integration systems, it was a $20 t-shirt. And I think he paid $28 for shipping. And that was like the only option.
Mhm.
And so, like, okay, if you look at that from the outside, it's like, okay, something's flawed in the system. But
Mhm.
part of our program was like, we got to get it up and running and make it better.
Mhm.
and rather than having perfection be the enemy of like actually doing something. So so it wasn't a perfect launch. There were a lot of bugs, and we were printing out labels, on our desktop computers, fulfilling packages in our garage, taking to the post office, paying for postage there. Like it was not smooth sailing, but we at least got something up and running.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say, so starting with those things, mostly e-commerce. We had one retail store in the first year that was local and in town that carried a few of the shirts and hats. But it was a very, simplified business model. But the one thing we did is continue to look at, okay, if we sell enough t-shirts and hats, like what else do we want to make a different style of t-shirt? And so we started exploring, basically scratching our own itch, is like, what is it that we need or desire for day-to-day activity, recreation, staying warm, because it's really cold here for about 8 months of the year. But that kind of started our scratching our own itch. And some of the ideas took 5 years to come together. Others kind of were accelerated just through customer feedback and scratching the itch, as I said.
Yeah. So then how did you scale? So it sounds like from what you and my brother were just saying, you've gotten to 7-figure months, but you're also, are you still shipping out of your house as well? Okay. How does that work? How do you handle all that?
So that's been, obviously, like, we don't still have that, the disconnect of paying $28 for a $20 t-shirt and shipping. But we've optimized the garage office to be not only for production and gloves and mittens. Leather gloves and mittens are our biggest product by far, and I'll get into the backstory there. But it is, a scrappiness of like, okay, we don't have a ton of space. How are we going to optimize for, shipments and packages? And then working with UPS, FedEx to come by and pick things up. It's, again, a slow kind of optimization process that has some peaks and valleys as far as, seasonal demands that we just got to be lean and scrappy.
I love that. So then how did you find your first manufacturer? So let's go from, you found a market, and then you had to find your first manufacturers, and then you scaled. It sounds like using crowdfunding. So I'd love to hear a little bit of that story of the growth journey.
You bet. So when it comes to, I think the first, say 6 to 12 months was just the t-shirts and hats, but soon after, we experimented with leather gloves and translating our logo onto, a work glove, an insulated work glove. So that's like when things changed significantly. We had bought, I think it was 5 different styles of gloves from the hardware store and a wood burner to see like, okay, can we translate the logo? And as we were playing around with that, at one of the other co-founders in his kitchen, a few friends came through and they're like, oh my gosh, you guys are doing gloves now? And we're like, I mean, maybe, like, would you want to pay for these? And the first sale was like just kind of farting around. And Liz said she'd pay $30 for them. And she's like, well, can you put my name on them too? So branded her initials on them. And that kind of started what became, 90% of our business, which is outdoor premium leather gloves that are personalized. So the first couple hundred, if not 1,000, we were buying from the local hardware store or other hardware stores in the region as they sold out of them. And so then we just slowly went up the supply chain to like, hey, where did they get their gloves sourced from? And then, okay, where do they get them sourced from? And then getting actually to the manufacturer, which that occurred over, like 6 to 8 months. So it wasn't like a few phone calls. But a bit of it, our model was like, well, we don't have the money to buy 2,000 gloves, but we can buy 36 at a time. And the demand was there and increasing in a way that was very different from our other products. So like the stats and the metrics were there, and people were willing to wait. Like, hey, when are you going to get more gloves in? Great, I want to order 10 for my whole family. It was a very different feel than previously. So we started, learning and asking questions. And I'd say after we more or less distributed, I'd say between 4,000 and 5,000, there was
Mhm.
enough feedback of like, hey, we love these gloves, but you need to make one that's beefier and like can
Mhm.
handle colder weather, more snow, great for
Mhm.
skiing. And
Mhm.
so we just kept pulling on that thread, and that's led into the year and a half journey, which led up to the Four Season Glove Kickstarter campaign back in 2016.
And so, and in 2016, when you launched that Kickstarter campaign, what was your goal to
Mm-hmm.
raise, and then how much did you end up raising, if you don't mind me
So our
asking?
no, not at all. And the
Okay.
cool thing is everything's transparent as far as like
Mhm.
on the site, and that was like a
That's
when
cool.
you talk about like the constraints of sometimes allow for creativity and using that
Mhm.
platform and sharing with our customers, hey, we got to raise $40,000 in order to meet the
Mhm.
minimum order requirements.
Mhm.
But we put in months and months of work in advance of that to be further along in the design. It wasn't like, hey, we have a concept, we might make this. It was like we
Mhm.
tested out five,
Yeah.
six prototypes and get it to the final point where it's like, now we know that this is battle tested.
Mhm.
I think I have the gloves with me here, but it was like, yeah, we tested them out, and like I beat the crap out of
Mhm.
them, and
Mhm.
like they stand up to the test of minus
Yeah.
20 degrees and a ton of
Mm.
snow and the worst conditions you can imagine.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then the goal was to have as big of a launch as possible and like
Mhm.
leverage and really lean on our community. And um, it ended up just over 200,000 as far as the funds raised, and we shipped out over the course of 4 months. I think it was around 40, right around 4,000 pair of Four Season
That's
gloves.
awesome.
So a totally like it blew out of the water,
Yeah.
our precise goals. But the big
Mhm.
thing was once we reached that goal of 40,000,
Mhm.
we knew we could manufacture.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, kind of took
Y-
off from there. But then we
y-
kind of had to figure out how to do it.
Yeah. So then how did you, was the Kickstarter kind of twofold then? Was it for both raising funds and for marketing, or did that just kind of, was that just an added bonus that there
That
was exposure?
I would say added bonus.
Okay.
I think it was a mechanism by which it's kind of like a pre-order campaign or structure of
Mhm.
like, hey, we have these ideas, and like again, how well we tell the story of like the
Mhm.
development we've gone into, our history with the other gloves.
Mhm.
Like this is our story, and
Yeah.
we worked with Launch Boom as a partner, and
Hmm.
this is a common thread throughout our whole history is working with great partners like Emmanuel,
Mhm.
um, or in this case for the Kickstarter, it was Launch Boom, and they were a young, scrappy organization just came together to help brands like us
Mhm.
who didn't know all the ins and outs of crowdfunding to,
Mhm.
really shape a structure and a plan that
Mhm.
it's not foolproof and it requires a ton of work.
Yeah.
But we had all those requirements that they were excited to take us on as a partner, and
Mhm.
um, yeah, we put everything we had into the campaign.
That's really cool. And then was it one and done, and you had enough for growth, and you just would reinvest profits, or did you find yourself doing the same thing again, or how did you scale the next for the next level of growth?
This is a great question. So that initial like, holy smokes, we got to deliver 4,000
Mm-hmm.
gloves, and we shipped to like 30 some countries, and we'd never done that before. So it
Wow.
was like first things first, we got to deliver for all these who like put their faith in us,
Mm-hmm.
and that took a lot of time. But through that, we learned okay what our production. We bake all the gloves in the oven and
Mm-hmm.
coat them in beeswax by hand. It's
Mm.
like okay, we learned a tremendous amount about
Mm-hmm.
systems and operation. And so first things first, we got to deliver for them, and then we had a lot of interest that resulted from it, whether it be from retailers or from people who didn't get them from the campaign. So the goal was deliver on that, and then slowly
Mm-hmm.
but surely manufacture additional units to satisfy retailer orders, as well
Mm-hmm.
as the call it the secondary market of those who weren't willing to support during the campaign,
Mm-hmm.
but then they've heard about them. So then it was just slowly but surely trying to manufacture as many as we could without sinking
Mm-hmm.
the ship, and getting into that cycle.
Yeah, definitely. And so I this is such a random question, but I'm so curious for you to use Giver in a sentence? Like how would one use giver?
Yes. Great question. So day one of the Kickstarter, I think we exceeded like $60,000 and like we had over 1,000 units. And it's like, oh my gosh, how are we gonna make this happen? And looking at the team and saying, guys, next 3 months we're just gonna have to buckle down and just give her. Like 100%.
Yeah.
And other cases would be or other uses would be, if you're about to lift something up with a group, it's like 1, 2, 3, give her. Like you lift at the same time. Or there's oftentimes, especially in the Canadian language, there's expletives used either before or after to qualify just how much you're going to be giving her. So it's a very all-encompassing term, but the wholehearted, you're giving it everything you've got is the great or proper definition.
And I absolutely want to
go ahead.
dovetail. I love the idea of the Canadian language. Is it English?
It is, in my opinion, it's, I don't know, it's beautifully specific and quirky. I would say I'm quirky, goofy in a lot of ways, especially with word choice and language. And I would say that it definitely has a connection with being exposed to Canadians and the Canadian language.
I heard that too, and I was like, I'm guessing there are a few things that are a little different, just like British English versus American English. But they're in Canada,
Canadians.
I love it because you've clearly givered for the last 11 years, and I think there's I'm curious to know if there's additional development that needs to keep happening, or like basically how do you find customers and nurture your current customers? Because you guys have grown so much over the last 10 years.
I'll touch real quick on the what it means to be like if our mission and philosophy is to inspire and encourage and support those given her in the ways that they choose, the things they're passionate about. They're like, man, that's why we exist, is like we're providing products in a community to help encourage and be just a spark of like whatever it takes to encourage one person or a group of people to go all in for something that they are really passionate about. It's very simple and like of course people should, teachers and coaches and lifestyle brands should be encouraging that. But at the root of it, that's what we're all about. And then you reflect that back on ourselves of like, okay, when it comes to running a company and a brand, like your wholehearted pursuit of doing this, okay, where does tension come up? Which is, should we be working 18 hours a day all the time and like driving ourselves into the ground? Because it is difficult to start a company and to build it up. So like I'll call it the ebb and the flow of, okay, there are times where we need to step up to fulfill 4,000 gloves to Kickstarter backers. But like at the same time, we can't present this lifestyle and this brand and then be driving our own employees into the ground. And like, that's something I, as a founder and CEO, have struggled with, is like, when I do something, I go all in, and balancing out how to run a team or manage a team, work with partners, and, how to dial things back, but also crank things up when it makes sense. It's been a roller coaster ride for sure. But I think we've learned through each phase of pushing for growth or giving her in, different ways to try and whether expand our production capacity, expand our product line, our offering to customers. We've tried out a lot of things, but I think boiling it down to like, hey, how have you grown your community? How have you established a stronger foundation? It is taking chances, being okay with taking risks as far as, participating in an event somewhere, a ski event, or supporting a school or a nonprofit program, knowing that like not everything is going to be out of the park home run, but each time we can take a chance, we learn a little bit more, And every time that we can connect with a person about our brand and what we're all about, like that's a win. And if it's just
Yeah.
one person at a time, like, sure, that's slow, and it's not putting a billboard up, and it's not having a commercial during the Super Bowl, but the connecting and growing slowly, one person at a time, is what creates the deepest roots. And we have had mistakes and times where it's like, well, we have to grow more in order to support this size of a team, or it's the chicken and the egg that comes up a ton. And you never know the right answer. There isn't a right answer.
Yeah, definitely.
But
And
I
I
would
love
say,
No,
I
you
would
go
say
ahead.
going back to like how have we navigated those things? It's working with people like Emmanuel, whether it be for advice and input or partnering, of like, oh my gosh, I got way too many things bounced around my head and I don't know the right answer. But
Yeah.
wait a second, Emmanuel, you're a pro. Like, you have so much experience in this. Can you help me talk me off the cliff edge of feeling like I'm really losing it, and wrap my head around like, okay, where does it make sense to take chances, as well as like stress test some of our hypotheses.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'd love to double down on what you're saying because, Bubba, you have always impressed me with how disciplined you are with what you just described. You said it so nonchalant, so calmly, but you have been very laser focused on building up organically, right? To the point where even when it was like all your metrics were pointing to ads are going to work phenomenally well, you were like, no, we're not running ads, right? There was a reason you had, right? Correct me
Mm-hmm.
if I'm wrong. There was a specific philosophy that you had about acquiring
For
customers,
sure.
wasn't there?
Yeah, and that came down to um, a like commitment of, similar to what I was sharing with the Kickstarters. Like, we have to deliver on the customers who are our loyal customers and who have, we have to honor those commitments. And I can be very clear that, like, man, we've dropped the ball. We've made mistakes. Like, we are human. And even to our most loyal customer base or to our Kickstarter supporters, like, we've made mistakes. And the kind of looking in the mirror is like, hey, when have we made more mistakes because we've tried to grow more aggressively? It's like, okay, we can't compromise on that, but we still have to take chances. um,
Yeah,
but I
and
think that
when you started, you even were like, "I'm only going to grow from word of mouth."
mhm.
I love it.
What?
And
Tell me
like,
more about that. Where did that come from?
no, and that was, part of that was the nature of our restrictions. Is like, well, we only have so much time, we only have so much money, and we only have these products. So if if people aren't going to support us, like our closest family and friends, like if they're not willing to support us, then like you might as well fail fast or learn that earlier versus later. Um, I mean, there were plenty of folks who were underwhelmed by the initial launch of the business and the company, and like, that's fine. But we just wanted to, and this is something I would recommend to everyone, is like, find out as early as possible if there is a market and if someone will pay for your services or product. Because it's not that humans are bad or that our friends and family are like evil, but the difference between like, hey, I've got this idea, would you buy it? And someone saying, yeah, sure, I'd buy it. The difference between that and like, okay, if you buy it, can you give me $20 right now? Like, getting the rubber hitting the road moment of, will someone actually pay for it when they have to depart from that $20 or whatever it might be. Getting to that moment as early as possible will clarify things. I'd say the most clarifying moment to get to early as you can.
Yeah, and it always has shocked me. I still remember because we met probably 5 years into your business, but later on. And I was looking at all your numbers, like the amount of organic you've done, because you had even turned down pretty big retailers, right? Weren't there some
Mm-hmm.
retailers you turned down? Are
Yep,
you
and that
comfortable?
was balance. Yeah, that was balancing out operational growth and capacity with like, hey, we can't compromise our core community. We can't compromise delivering to them. as hard as it is to say no to a retailer
Mm-hmm.
or something that's shiny and bright that could result in a bigger, um, you know, more success or more revenue, that those were hard choices, but we could not compromise what we were delivering to our customers. And
Mm-hmm.
some of those decisions, when you have some hindsight and you look back on it, it's like, oh man, that actually probably would have been a sweet deal. But but I think the commitment to internally with the team, as well as like, hey, the one thing we're going to deliver for our customers, we can't compromise on that.
Yeah.
No, and the thing is, you can compromise on it, but you chose not to. That's a
Mm.
level of
Yes.
discipline that is like worthy of
Mm-hmm.
applause, because I can't
Yeah.
tell you how many founders I show up. I mean, I was literally talking with someone just yesterday that was like, "Nah, I don't want to build an audience. I think I'm just gonna, take some ads, spend on ads, and run them to my new product that I haven't even come up with yet." Right? And it's like, but they know immediately they're gonna go straight for paid ads. Right? And it's just a
Mm.
hard way to grow because you're building a business that has a rocky foundation, a salty
Mm.
foundation, because it's, what if the ads stop working? There's nothing
Yeah.
else. You don't have an audience. You don't have an ethos. You don't have a brand. And so you were disciplined with that to the point where literally I was like, so how much have you guys spent tonight? You were like 30,000. I was like, oh, you're about 30,000 a month. That's a healthy budget. You're like, no, ever. Ever. And this is after having 7-figure launches and having, doing several big numbers and having 6-figure, what do you call that, deals with retailers that you had turned
Mm-hmm.
down. It's like you're having all this
Mhm.
success and you're not running ads.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, this guy, there's something about this guy. This guy's different.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be still another like year or two later before we came together to run them. And sure enough, as soon as you got going with them, they took off. And
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
from people listening, like, that's the way to do it. Build that
Mm-hmm.
organic foundation first, because everything just works better, right? Because now
Mm-hmm.
you have an audience that is easier to build lookalikes off of, that is easier
Mm-hmm.
to rally behind. You can tell them, hey, we launched this ad, go comment on it. And you have retargeting audiences. That makes your
Mm-hmm.
ads so much easier, so that way you don't have to spend as much wasting money on ads that don't work. So
Yeah.
kudos
Mhm.
to you, man.
Well,
Definitely.
and I was going to say a lot of like, while it maybe would be foolish, not foolish, stubbornness of not paying for ads. A part of it was like we didn't really have any money to spend on ads, so that helped
Mm-hmm.
with the decision making. Is like unless we started to take out loans, like we didn't have money to spend. But then talking with you, Emmanuel, especially in that stage of understanding what is possible, even if you don't necessarily engage in it, it was an awareness of okay, what paths moving forward we could take,
Mm-hmm.
and then strategically deciding how to test that out. Um, I mean, that was a great learning lesson. Was like, okay, well, we're kind of forced into not being able to spend on ads by our own choices, but let's continue to really double down on the community we do have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, man, that honesty to this day, the ability to poll that audience and say, hey, what do you think of this, this, and this? And to get
Mm-hmm.
like solid feedback, um, man, it's powerful. It's
Mm-hmm.
really powerful. And obviously, like the word of mouth piece and like being boots on the ground and talking with people, whether at art fairs or at events or just out working,
Mm-hmm.
shoveling snow, talking through and getting that honest feedback. Um, Man, it's invaluable. It's
Mm-hmm.
really powerful.
Did you jump in full time in 2012, or did it take some time before?
That's a great point, and I find it important to give the full context. When we
Mm-hmm.
first started, myself and the other two co-founders, we had at least one other job. I myself was
Mm-hmm.
working at the airport, so I do 15, 20 hours a week, and then I was working in a
Mm-hmm.
restaurant that was just in the evening. So
Mm-hmm.
a flexible schedule that allowed
Mm-hmm.
for nights and weekends where we were really
Mm-hmm.
diving in and building the brand. And I maintained that for probably the first 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So like a pretty lengthy amount of
Yeah.
time, as well as, when it comes to compensation, like I was I was earning money to pay rent and cover the
Mm-hmm.
bills in other ways
Mm-hmm.
to, again, try and get the flywheel spinning with Giver.
Mm-hmm.
So very much was an intense time of
Yep.
working a lot
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we weren't sending out 20 orders a day.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a chance to slowly build on what was working,
Mm-hmm.
adjust, but also not be in that kind of scary place of
Mm-hmm.
like, if we don't sell 20 orders, if we don't, process 20 orders tomorrow, I can't pay rent.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but man, I tell you, um, that's a hard question or hard
Mm-hmm.
insight to give an entrepreneur or someone starting off, is like,
Mm-hmm.
how all in do you need to be?
Mm-hmm.
Because you get one person says, hey, quit your other jobs and leave, like burn the boats, burn the ships,
Mm-hmm.
right?
All
And
in.
it's like,
Yep.
okay, there are times where you have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say, at least for me, it was
Mm-hmm.
beneficial to know that I had other things in other work. It was
Mm-hmm.
actually better for me to have breaks,
Yeah.
doing other work, interacting with other people. I mean, working in a restaurant was phenomenal,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it was a good balance for me.
Yeah.
And it did actually allow, kind of create the conditions to be, I guess I'll use the word slower, but I think, allow a timeline that was more natural and organic, especially
Mm-hmm.
with a team developing products and me personally tinkering and playing and then product
Mm-hmm.
testing something for a year. It's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
a drawn out timeline kind of worked for us.
I think there's
Yeah.
an
And I love.
inherent. Oh, go ahead, Grace.
I was just gonna say you gave it your all, so you givered.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't
Mm-hmm.
think I'm using the past tense correctly, so you can correct me if I'm wrong.
It's okay. The greatest part about the term, there really is no wrong way to use it.
All right, awesome. You clearly did that, but you did it in a disciplined way. I think that there is the thought that when you jump in and you are giving it your all, if a retailer calls you, you say yes and you figure it out later. Like, but
Yep.
you were I feel like this is such an amazing example of how you can still give it your all,
Mm-hmm.
and how putting up boundaries for yourself and for your growth is actually still just as much giving it your all as the one who jumped in the deep end barely knowing how to swim.
For
So
sure.
I
Well,
love the way that you grew.
and I can give other examples like that are the true, like, okay, what happens when you say yes to something? We
Mm-hmm.
did it was kind of outside of our wheelhouse, but we said yes
Mm-hmm.
to a company to make, I think it was around 1,000 custom hats, and we try to
Mm-hmm.
figure out a way to do this because, like, man, if we can make this deal happen, like that's
Mm-hmm.
equivalent of like, a month's worth of online sales. And we
Mm-hmm.
said yes to them, and then we just didn't deliver on what they were looking
Mm-hmm.
for, and it ended up being, rather than like a net positive month of revenue, it was
Mm-hmm.
like we lost, I think it was around $5,000 that
Oof.
we had to send them, or we had to make honest on that agreement. And
Mm-hmm.
it was really painful. And
Yeah.
like, that was okay. Now we have to work on selling like an additional 250 t-shirts in order
Mm.
to like make up for it. But man, you can't just have principles and, um, values that are executed when it's convenient. When it's
Mm-hmm.
inconvenient is really painful. Like shit, that was tough. But we had to
Yeah.
do the
Yeah.
right thing,
Yeah.
and I think some of it then informed some of those later
Got
no's,
it.
where it's like,
Yep.
okay, this is shiny and bright and could
Mm-hmm.
be great, but we've learned our lesson.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love that there was an inherent assumption in what Grace asked you about when you went all in 2012, the job. I did the same thing when I was talking to you because
Mm-hmm.
people recommend that. Quit the job, and then once the business starts succeeding, you go all in the business, and then you raise your standard of living, get a new car, maybe move into a new house, do all those things. I'm wondering, can you clarify, has that been your story? And if not, or if so, why or why not?
No, I mean, uh, it has not.
Mm-hmm.
Even though there were a lot of people recommending that. I mean, shoot,
Mm-hmm.
even my friend, like my family members who were like, Bubba, you're crazy. Why are you doing this to yourself? And it's like, I don't know. Like, this to me seems right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think it's rooted in a firm belief in what we're doing is, what we're building and what we're doing is very powerful. And it has so much opportunity and potential, that it's not a sacrifice, or it's not viewed. I don't view it in the term of like, oh well, I'm sacrificing everything for this future state that is maybe going to happen. It's like, no, I believe in what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so working other jobs to pay the rent, to cover bills, it's like, I know that this will give us a better chance at achieving what our desired goals are.
Mm-hmm.
And if anything, I've just been a little bit behind the curve in that I want to make adjustments, or, say, step away from my restaurant job once I know there's stability with the team and with our path forward. So a bit of like, I use the term like, we got to grow out of our pants before we get new ones. Like, they got to be ratty. They got to be basically like non-existent
Yeah.
before we get new pants.
Yep.
Or
And to
shoes. You
clarify,
can use whatever metaphor.
to give specifics, what I meant is you've had success and you've achieved a lot, but you haven't done the I'm quitting my job, I'm going to get a big house, I'm going to get a big fancy car, right? Like, what is your current situation specifically?
Yeah, I would say I've remained incredibly frugal. And I would say that extends across our whole team. At the same time, we have taken chances. We have gone with products that we're not sure on, or we've taken risks here and there. But I think maybe even to a fault, the frugality and conservative nature of expenses, or probably to a fault. But at the same time, that has resulted in us having a more resiliency. And shoot, you look at the last 3 years, and it's like, okay, people are like, oh, make sure you save for the rainy day fund, and it's like, well, okay, COVID hits and the world's in this wild spin. Who knows what's going to happen? I would say some of our frugal choices, or my frugal mentality, has enabled us to sustain, in the best way that we could through those times.
And I'm gonna keep pushing, because what are those frugal ways? Because I noticed because people need to know, like, you're still in the same spot, right?
Yes, the living where we're working. I have the same 1999 Chevy Suburban that I've had for a long time, and
Wow.
it's doubling down on the resources and the space that we do have, and personally, working more and more to try and support the team. So wherever you can save 5 cents, 10 cents, that's that kind of scrappiness and bootstrapping remains.
Yeah.
For sure.
I love it, because
to the ground level.
Yeah, it needs to be more consistently talked about, right? Because most people talk about getting rich and getting rich quick, or all of that, and we get that that's kind of not the goal, but still a lot of us believe it. Like, the goal is to get rich so that we can be something else, we can be richer. But I mean, you're still in the same garage that you started with, right? You haven't moved out. You're living above the warehouse where you guys work, right? And a bunch of guys live there too. Even though you're successful, driving the same car, still working the job, even though you have this 8-figure business, right? And it's just like, that is such a different mentality of how to run things, right? But it's also a testament to why you got to where you got to, and how sustainable it is. That level of discipline and ethos, to me, is not talked about enough. So I commend you for that, my friend.
Yeah.
Well,
Definitely.
I appreciate that. And yeah, man, there's endless ways in which to look at the good decisions, the winning moves we made, the where we've had hiccups. But I think, the frugality and being scrappy, man, it's made it easier to, again, be making decisions based on our values and what's best for the team when times are hard. So when COVID hit, to say, hey, I don't know how we're going to do this, but we got a space, like, we got a job for you here. We're going to figure it out. And I think maybe to a fault, but like, I'm not going to ask anyone on the team to do something that I haven't done or would do in, like, to the nth degree. And I think leading by example in that way, has resulted in a pretty powerful team. That that thrives on accomplishing and, taking on challenges and accomplishing. Sometimes it's not always with a lot of positive energy or, cheering of like, oh
Yeah,
my
yeah.
gosh, how are we going to do that? But we've grown through each of those challenges of like, hey, last year we sent out, 10,000 orders in the last 6 months of the year. This year we're going to do 20,000, and minds exploding.
Mhm.
Like, how are we going to handle 20,000 shipments out of the
Mhm.
garage? But then it's like, all right, that requires us to think differently. And man, every time we've come, on the other side of one of those big pushes, or like our Frontier Mitten Kickstarter campaign, it's like, um, there's a tremendous amount of growth and camaraderie that comes
Mhm.
from that.
And can you
Mhm.
tell us how easy it is once you hit that 7-figure month, 8-figure run rate, and you say everything's easy street, right? After that, everyone thinks that, hey, if I could just have a business like Bubba's, man, I'd be set. Life would be great. I'd be rolling in dough.
I mean, I think a good way to describe it is that we've traded up for, I'm going to say, better problems or better
Mm.
challenges.
Mhm.
Like, we as a team are committed towards tackling big problems and big challenges, and like, how do we best deliver for our community and our audience. Um, and I would say with, increased revenue and having, the numbers are mind blowing when we look at where we were to what we had accomplished. Um, but no, the challenges remain. Like, the struggle is real. And if you don't have, I share with all other aspiring or current entrepreneurs, like, if you don't
Mhm.
have the heart and the passion to keep powering through,
Mhm.
you got to know that about yourself. Because, man, there are times where even if we're, doubling revenue from the year before, the struggles are quite real. But
Yeah.
but is it worth it? And at the core of who I am, it is, and at the core of our team, hell yeah, it's worth it. And it
Mhm.
has to be hell yeah. If not, you gotta rethink things.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure that'll be sobering to some folks. It's hard and only gets harder the more money you make.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Are there any positives though to winning like that once you get to that level?
Oh, the positives outweigh the negatives. So the
Mm.
Mhm.
challenges are real, and you're right to say that the size and scope of them changes, but generally more challenges come your way. Uh, but the fact that we're able to employ, earlier on, it was myself and my cousin, and then it was, we had 2 employees, and then, over the last few years, it's varied from 20 to 35, 40 people. And
Mhm.
to be able to have a team and support individuals that have a job here, some of them part-time, 10, 15 hours a week, some of them
Mhm.
full-time, um, who are involved and committed towards solving big problems, like, that's a
Mhm.
win. Like, that's a
Yeah.
win. And I gave a talk a few months ago. This day and age, it can feel if you're not a company or a CEO that is solving world hunger or curing cancer, then like, we're a failure, right? Like,
Mhm.
it's in this current environment. There's a lot of struggle in the world, but I keep looking back at it as like, we have a team that are putting good vibes out in the world, and we're
Mhm.
getting better at it every day, and we're supporting families, and we're supporting a community, locally,
Mhm.
regionally, nationally, and internationally to some degree, that's putting out positive vibes
Mhm.
and is putting that spark of pursuing that which you love and you're passionate about. And like, that's that's awesome. Like,
Yeah.
um, there isn't anything cooler than that, and anything
Mhm.
more rewarding. And hearing from customers, or, man, I still freak out when I'm driving down the street and I see someone wearing our gloves that I don't
Yeah.
know.
Pretty cool.
Those I always share with people. Hey, that fuels our fire, because
Mhm.
the challenges can be inundating, but
Mhm.
knowing the impact that it has on people. And I know it's a stretch to say, hey, a pair of gloves is changing the world, but at
Mhm.
the core of it, it is. We're
Mhm.
providing an awesome product and over delivering on what it is that we're putting out into the world, to the best of our ability. And that's a you know that's a big win.
Yeah. Definitely. So what are
But
some
there
of the
are a ton of challenges in the world.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah.
And if we can be a source of positive change, as small as that might be, that's what we want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we can probably jump into like a little bit of the founder rounder stuff, right, Emmanuel?
Yeah, we love this founder rounder thing. We're trying hard to make that a term, but just
Yep.
roundtable, solving challenges together. Anything that you're struggling with that you'd love to just have us, we can just toss ideas out and strategize, or even things that you're just curious about that we could help
Yeah,
with.
yeah. So one question for both of you. I'm not a tech guy. Like
Mm-hmm.
the core of who I am is not a tech savvy person. But the last 4 years, I would say, you could break it down into other chunks. There's been a tremendous amount of changes and shifting in,
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
Google and Meta and advertising, such that it's not, gravity is no longer real, but things have changed
Mm-hmm.
significantly. And to someone who's not that savvy in that world, I think it's important for both of you to share from being kind of in the background and understanding a lot of ways that you know plays out with e-commerce and businesses, to what degree the shifting, like how you'd rank it, and like, okay, it's a 1 out of 10 or it's a 10 out of 10 as far as how much has changed, and how it impacts other business owners or e-commerce stores.
12,
Mm-hmm.
13,
Great.
I'll keep going up. And I would, it's such a big thing. I could spend 3 hours talking about it, but I was curious, like changed in to what effect, to what end, right?
Just like the marketplace, whether it be for advertising or just means in which people are, everyone loves the fact that, hey, if you're on the internet, people can find you. And it's like, yes,
Mm-hmm.
that's true. Like, we'd rather have the internet than not internet.
Mm-hmm.
But the amount of changes that have occurred as far as the landscape for privacy, communicating with customers,
Mm-hmm.
that the change has occurred in the last, again, 3 years compared to the prior 10 years has been
Been huge.
huge.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, just the internet itself coming up. I still remember people who were jumping on Google when you just needed to have a website, and it would
Mm-hmm.
rank in Google, and that was all you needed to do to have a business. SEO, right? Was all that it took. Or when Facebook ads came out, how massive a shift that was. But they didn't have a pixel. There was no pixel, so you were literally just doing like click campaigns and page like campaigns, and those worked, right? And then they came out with dynamic product ads and syncing your catalog with Shopify, and literally all you would have to do, and this is right pre-pandemic, going into the pandemic, and before Cambridge Analytica and all that, where literally all you had to do was sync your catalog, which is just products on a white background, an image of them, with Facebook, and Facebook could take that image, not even much of your text or anything, and find you people who are ready to buy that day. An hour later, you were getting sales. Like the
Mm-hmm.
level of creepiness and how much they know about their audience and who's ready to buy, like it was astonishing,
Mm-hmm.
And then now here we are, post all of that. So what I'd like to say is that it was too easy then. That was just too easy.
Mm-hmm.
Like they knew too much about us. There
Mm-hmm.
was no way that was going to last. And so we had
Mm-hmm.
the reset, Cambridge Analytica, iOS 14, iOS 14.5, iOS 15. The whole quarantine, privacy,
Mm-hmm.
like you said. And now we're in a different era now, where
Mm-hmm.
we've gone through all of that huge splurge in
Mm-hmm.
tech, right? And on internet sales just shot up, and now that's gone. But what is not gone is tried and true business principles, right? The stuff
Mm-hmm.
that you did phenomenally well, that's why I harped on it so much, is building an audience, building
Mm-hmm.
connection with that audience, solving problems for that audience, listening, nurturing a community, and then providing them content and solutions, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
billboards have worked for a long time. They're not gone.
Mm-hmm.
TV ads, right? Radio ads. Yeah, we think these things are gone, but there's still a market for them. And what do you need inside of each of those? Creative and copy. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you're really good at doing those things in a way that allows people to build community or take an action in a direct response way, that's going to work no matter what changes, whether it's SEO or internet or TV or whatever it may be. And now with
Mm-hmm.
ChatGPT, I mean, to describe how tectonic of a shift things have changed, now ChatGPT is coming out. It'll write a lot of that stuff for you, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
fighting. A lot of folks are fighting like, oh, I'm a writer and it can't write copy. Yes, it can. is real good.
Mm-hmm.
It is
Mm-hmm.
shockingly good at writing. Don't fight it. Let it go and leverage it. So anyway, that's a
That's
long
good.
answer, but there's a lot of change. Grace,
No, there has been a lot of change.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I feel like you said everything, Mel. That's I think I was just going to add what you said at that last bit, which is the essential. I feel like the essential elements are all the same still. You know, people still connect with story, and you have a good
yeah.
story, and you're a good storyteller. So, no matter what channel you end up using, it's a good tool. You know.
Yeah, and the key thing is people buy from people, and the more you can
Yeah.
humanize, I think that is one downside that the whole rise of the internet sales type of how easy it was. It created this environment where you could sit behind your laptop without a face, without a name, without a
Mm-hmm.
brand, and make millions of dollars in sales, right? And no one
Mm-hmm.
ever knows who you are. But it's just there's a distance there. And I think we're kind of
Mm-hmm.
coming circling back to people want to buy from people again, and we need to go back
Yep.
to that in order to be successful. And it does work. If people can
Mm-hmm.
see you as a human or see someone in your brand as a human or see your brand as a human, someone that they can relate to, that's what's really making getting effective sales, effective ads. That's what actually is making the ads work better. And I think that's what the ad platforms are looking for. A lot of people ask us on the podcast, how do I do new customer acquisition? How do I make more sales? All those kinds of
Mm-hmm.
things. And the answer is focus on what worked before. We got
Yeah.
too easy, right? People who learned ads in the last 5 years, they're struggling, or the 5 years before iOS 14, they're struggling now because they learned a lot of media buying, how to be in the
Mm-hmm.
platform, not marketing, right? Not
Hmm.
selling
Mm.
to people, right? People are human. They want to connect with a good story. They want to hear a story from your customer, a story from your brand, a story from you as the founder, so that they can put
Mm-hmm.
themselves in your shoes and say, "Oh yeah, I'm like that person. I wonder if they
Mm.
can." And I have problems similar to that person. They solved them. I wonder if I could solve them with their help too. And
Mm-hmm.
now
Hmm.
you can. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of stories,
That's
I'm
a good
curious.
question.
How you talked about your audience. Do you have any stories of your audience where you're just like, man, I wish I could tell them these things, how awesome they are, or this thing that, yeah, I just would love for you to share some love for your audience here. I mean,
No, I would say the biggest thing is that um, we get a ton of ideas and feedback, and we always share like, hey, we've tested out. I think of all the extreme ways I can test out a pair of gloves or mittens, and I do that to the greatest extent possible. But I don't work in a lumber mill. I don't work in Texas in the 100-degree heat. I don't work
mm,
training Navy SEALs off of a jet ski. And so
Mm-hmm.
hearing how like encouraging and inspiring, test them out in the ways that you see as extreme, the products, and then give us feedback, because that's how we make things better. Like I can only test to the greatest extent of my laboratory here in Jackson, Wyoming, or when I get to
Mm-hmm.
travel. But that feedback, while it isn't necessarily, we're not necessarily able to implement it overnight. It's the
Mm-hmm.
synthesis of all that feedback that allows us to make strategic changes and deliver for customers over time. Perfect example of that would be the Four Season glove campaign back in 2016. You know, we launched that as like, all right, we know that there's a demand for a glove that is, 100% waterproof, can handle minus 20-degree temperature, and
Mm-hmm.
handles snow really well. So we're going to go with this product. And we heard from a lot of people as a result of that campaign, hey, I'm a mitten person. You need to make this in a mitten. And I was like, oh, shoot, I'm not a mitten person. But
Mm-hmm.
that started this thread of like, I need to get to know mitten people.
Mm-hmm.
And over the course of, it's 3+ years, talked with enough to learn, oh, man, it doesn't matter like the dexterity piece that we built into the Four Season. There's a group of people that when their hands are cold at whatever temperature that is, it's miserable. Whether they're
Mm.
watching a sporting event, they're snowmobiling, skiing, they're just getting to their car, whatever it is. So then it was like, okay, now I understand this community of mitten wearers.
Mm-hmm.
They get cold hands, and
Yeah.
so that's what we're going to use to build the mitten. And that took, again, it was multiple years. But then we played with, all right, what's we had some mittens that were like just like it looked like a light bulb or a sleeping bag on your hand, to play with
Uh,
like what's the maximum amount of insulation.
mm-hmm.
But because we synthesized all that feedback and talked with those people, eventually we launched the Frontier mittens. And I'm very proud of what we did make happen and the final product.
Very cool.
And then building on that, right now in October, we're doing a breast cancer awareness partnership with the Breasties. So an organization that is, an all around, by community, for community, those who have gone through or experiencing or impacted by breast cancer. So we've made pink mittens where there's like a pink cuff and pink threading, like a really cool exclusive product launch, and donating 15% of those proceeds to the Breasties organization. Is hearing feedback from customers. Hey, do it in a cool colorway, or do something to support, or to bring attention and involvement to breast cancer awareness. So like that didn't happen right away, but when we finally did make it work, really proud of what they look like. And again, taking in that customer feedback.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Bubba. We're so grateful. And I'm sure everyone listening has gotten so much out of it. We want to support you. How can we, so you've supported us, how can we support you? What do you got going on? And how can we put more money in your pocket, in your team's pocket, and support the causes you're supporting? What do you got for us?
Well, the breast cancer awareness push, check out our website. It's giver.com. It's GIVE-R.com. You'll see that promotion there, knowing that 15% of proceeds are going towards the Breasties. And then big thing would be, even if you don't live in a cold climate or you don't have a need for personalized premium outdoor leather gloves, they make for awesome gifts. And the personalization that we do, so we hand brand name or initials on the glove. So as you're piecing together, whether it be for a family member, a friend, someone you're getting a holiday gift for, it makes for an awesome gift, and a gift that's going to last for a long time. So check that out and know that, that's kind of where we really had the initial spark, was with the branding on the gloves. So it makes for awesome gifts. So I share with everyone that if there's someone you care enough about that you want to get them something kick-ass, the glove collection and the personalization options are worth checking out.
Awesome. We would do that. Buying gifts for the whole family this year. Come and give her gloves.
Yep.
And y'all
should go.
Thank you so much, Bubba. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, I appreciate, I think it's really important, listeners, here, the degree to which, like, I can't say it in words, the number of times you, Emmanuel, and Grace, through Emmanuel, have supported us and been, me personally, when I've been struggling or having challenges, like the intel, the willingness to just jump on a phone call and talk through things, as well as providing guidance and insight on how to move forward. You guys you have in the past and up until now made a huge difference and impact on our team. And I know that everyone who's listening and viewing, to know that you guys are the real deal, and the things you've gone through are entirely, they're so valuable. And so I just thank you both for making it possible and being a source, just as we're striving with Giver, of putting positive information and vibes out in the world.
Oh, thanks, Bubba.
That was very
I know Emmanuel's one of the best motivational coaches when you're down, for sure. So
appreciate you.
That's sweet.
That.
Thanks, Bubba.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll continue to do that. We appreciate you.
Yeah.
Kick ass. Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
All right. Talk to you soon.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.